for the state to question an officer about suspicions that officer had about Mr. Arbery's involvement in crime in Satilla Shores, Royal Oaks, Fancy Bluff, or Highway 17. As the state has indicated, it's all one big, very close area. So to intimate that Ahmaud was not a suspect in these reports, we all could tell that was kind of a useless question, because the officer, there's no way that he went and investigated a suspicious person report. And we're not allowed to get into the content of those suspicious persons reports in case those identifying characteristics are consistent with Ahmaud Arbery. We are following the court's ruling that we are not talking about Ahmaud Arbery's criminal history or suspicions of criminal acts outside of what was taking place at 220 Satilla Drive. So with that caveat, I wanted to state our position.
Right. Again, that's the defendant's position. The court has already ruled. I've made clear what my ruling is. All right. I understand that we're ready for the panel. Does the state have its next witness ready?
Yes, Judge, we do.
Okay. All right. Let's go get the panel.
All rise for the jury. Please be seated.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All right, welcome back. We are ready to proceed. Before we do, I do want to take care of just a little bit of housekeeping and make sure everybody's aware of what the court's plan is as far as the schedule. Normally, Veterans Day is a holiday and the court is closed. But given the way this case is moving forward, what I'm planning on doing is keeping the court open on Veterans Day and moving forward on that day with testimony. Now, I do know that some, and obviously for good reasons, do pay respects or do other things on Veterans Day. So what I'd like to know from you, and you can go ahead, you don't need to tell me now, but send me a note if there's an issue that you have on Veterans Day, and I'll go ahead and see if I can get that addressed and make sure I understand exactly what that need is. But at this point, for planning purposes, do plan to be in court on Veterans Day. Okay? So again, if you need to get a note to me, you're welcome to do so. But with that, that's all the housekeeping I've got for this morning. We are ready to proceed with the evidence, as I understand. Again, I want to thank you for being here with us in Glenn County and in the Superior Court. State ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor, the state's ready. At this time, the state will call Detective Roderick Nohilly.
Swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Go ahead, have a seat.
All right, Detective, please state your name and spell it for the record.
Roderick Nohilly, Roderic, last name Nohilly.
All right, Detective Nohilly, how are you currently employed?
I'm a sergeant on patrol at the Glenn County Police Department
And how long have you been with the Glenn County Police Department?
for 16 years.
And your entire time in law enforcement, has it been with the Glenn County Police Department?
No. I worked for Brunswick Police Department beforehand for about 3.5 years.
So you're coming up on 20 years.
I am.
All right. And are you currently a post-certified law enforcement officer?
I am.
And you're a sergeant over patrol, so what do you do now?
I supervise a patrol shift.
And those the officers who drive around the cars?
Yes.
All right. Do you drive around in a car?
I drive around in a car, yes.
All right. Do you respond to 911 calls?
I do.
Are you assigned to any particular baker?
No.
You're over all of them?
Yes.
All right. So at any point in time with your tenure in Glenn County, have you been assigned to CID or in any capacity investigating things like homicides, armed robberies, and things like that?
Yes, I was assigned as a criminal investigator in the Criminal Investigation Division.
And when was that?
The first time from 2010 to around 2014, the second from 2018 to a few months ago, well, beginning of this year.
Beginning of 2021. Gotcha. All right. So I'm going to direct your attention specifically to February 23rd, 2020, in the evening at the Glenn County Police Department headquarters. Were you present there at that time?
Yes.
All right. So what we're going to talk about specifically is an interview with Greg McMichael, okay?
Yes.
All right. Now, you're not the one who conducted the initial interview with Greg McMichael, did you?
No.
All right. You then became involved because you stopped by?
Yes.
Why'd you stop by?
I was standing by while someone else was doing a statement form. I was just waiting.
And did you know Greg McMichael prior to February 23rd of 2020?
I did.
Tell the jury how you knew Greg McMichael prior to February 23rd, 2020.
I knew him as one of the investigators at our DA's office here. He would come to our station, deliver subpoenas here and there, and I would talk to him. I knew him professionally.
And how long had you known him professionally?
Since at least 2005.
All right. So, any personal relationship, like out to dinner or anything like that?
No.
So, when you stopped by, was he still in the interview room and was the recording still going?
Yes, it was. And yes, he was.
Sorry, that was a bad question. So, he was still in the interview room,
Yes, he was.
and you stopped by to talk to him.
Yes.
Did he agree to speak with you freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
And what was kind of the nature or tone of the conversation you had with him?
We were just talking about what happened. You know, he was telling me what happened.
All right, so I'm going to hand you what has already been marked and admitted into evidence as State's Exhibit 225A. All right. Prior to coming to court today, have you had an opportunity to review State's Exhibit 225A, the transcript of the interview with Greg McMichael?
I have.
All right. And I'm going to direct your attention at this time specifically to page 59 of that transcript. All right?
Okay.
All right. Now, I'm going to have you specifically give the jury the quotes from your conversation with him starting at line 2. What did you ask Greg McMichael?
What's his name? The one who owns this house.
Now, when you say the one who owns this house, what house are you referring to?
The house that was under construction a few doors down from his home.
Okay. And what was his answer to you?
I have no idea. Never met him. Never met him.
Okay. What is the next question that you asked Greg McMichael?
Did this guy break into a house today?
And what did Greg McMichael say in response from line 8 to line 13?
Well, that's just it. I don't know. That's what I told what's her name out there. I said, listen, you might want to go knock on doors down there because this guy had just done something that he was fleeing from. And I don't know, you know, you might have gone, he might have gone in somebody else's house.
Okay.
Or somebody's house.
All right. So when he says, that's just it, I don't know, that's what I told what's her name out there. Do you have any idea who what's her name out there is?
I'm assuming at the time it was Sergeant Oliver.
Okay. So he's talking about, I was telling a law enforcement officer out there that they needed to go figure out what he might have done.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and direct your attention then to the very next page, page 60 of the transcript. Direct your attention specifically to line 7. What did you ask him?
Have you ever seen him before?
And when you say, have you ever seen him before, who are you referring to?
Ahmaud Arbery. At the time, we didn't know his identity.
All right, so you didn't know what his name was at this time.
No.
So have you ever seen him before? What did Greg McMichael say?
No. I'd never laid eyes on the guy.
You then say, okay. What does Mr. McMichael then say?
Nobody in that neighborhood, or at least nobody that has seen the video, that this guy has a clue who he is.
All right. I know that was difficult. Okay. So nobody in that neighborhood, or at least nobody that has seen the video, that this guy has a clue who he is.
Yes.
All right. What did you ask next?
Did he put it out on Facebook or something, the video?
Now, who is he that you're talking about? Did he put it out on Facebook?
The owner of the house under construction.
All right. What was Mr. Greg McMichael's response?
I don't know. He may have, but
Okay, so he says, I don't know about this video being put out on Facebook.
correct.
All right. And then did you ask, how many people in the neighborhood have seen this video? And what was his response?
I know that Diego has, and
And then you were asking him who Diego was, right?
yeah, is Diego the other guy that came in? He says, Greg McMichael says, no, that is,
So then you asked him who Diego was, right?
yes.
All right, so going on to the next page at the top, you're asking him who Diego is on line 3. What does Greg McMichael say so he can tell you who Diego is?
Diego is the little short Hispanic guy that lives like 2 doors down from that open house, the construction house.
All right. Was he able to give you Diego's last name?
No, I don't believe so.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and then direct your attention to specifically page 65. All right. And at this point in time, are you asking Greg McMichael to speculate as to what was going through the mind of Ahmaud Arbery? If you look at the line on page 64, would that help refresh your recollection about what you're talking about here?
Which line?
Take a look at lines 22 through 24 on page 64.
Yes.
Okay. So when asking Greg McMichael to speculate about what's going through the mind of Ahmaud Arbery, what does Greg McMichael say on lines 3 through 6?
He was trapped like a rat. I think he was wanting to flee, and he realized that something, he was not going to get away.
Okay. And then I think you indicated, and well, I'll ask you, what did you then say to him based on this? He was trapped like a rat. I think he was wanting to flee, and he realized he was not going to get away.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Yeah, but he could have run around your son, right?
What's he say?
Sure.
Okay. And then what'd you say?
From what I can tell in the video, the whole road is there.
So you had seen the video at this point in time that you're talking to Greg McMichael.
I had seen it on scene briefly. Yeah.
Okay. So at that point in time, what does Greg McMichael say to you? Lines 12 through 16.
Oh, yeah. And he was much faster than Travis would ever be. He had opportunity to flee further, We had chased him around the neighborhood a bit, but he wasn't winded at all. Continue.
And then what's the next line? Just on 16,
This guy he was in good shape.
Okay. Now, after speaking with Greg McMichael, was Greg McMichael then free to leave, and did he in fact leave?
Yes.
I will pass the witness. Thank you.
No, it actually will be Mr. Hogue. I'm just going to find that one map.
Behind the big one.
Thank you, Honor.
Good morning, Investigator No Healy.
Good morning.
I'm Frank Hogue. I represent Greg McMichael. This is Laura Hogue, my wife and law partner. She represents him with me. I just have a few questions for you today. And I want to go back to where you were with the state just now. And let's start on page 59. And you were asked to read the section from lines 2 to 13. You tell me when you're with me. And this is the topic concerning no clue who he was, he referring to Ahmaud Arbery at that time on that date when this all happened, right? Got the context?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry, I was looking at the page.
Okay. This is a section where, and I just called it no clue who he was. That was the point of it, right? The section you read.
Right.
Objection to that characteristic.
All right, well, we can reread it then if summing it up isn't good enough.
Let's just make sure he's on the same page. You're
All right,
fine.
you're at page 59, line 2. Go ahead and read 2 through 13 to yourself. That's what you read to the jury just a few minutes ago. Particularly lines 8 through 13 where Greg McMichael is telling you, that's just it, I don't know. That's what I told, and you said it was Sergeant Oliver that he was talking to. What's her name? He said, I said, listen, you might want to go knock on doors because this guy has just done something that he was fleeing from, and I don't know, he might have gone in somebody's house. And your understanding in the context was when Mr. McMichael's telling you, I don't know, he didn't know the person's name.
Objection. As to this officer's understanding of their context, it's not relevant.
It's the context of what Mr. McMichael was saying to him that I'm trying to establish.
Well, again, you're asking him about what Greg McMichael was thinking and to explain his statements. Let's just rely upon his statements. If it's relevant in any other way, That's fine, but let's not have this witness characterize somebody else's statement. The statement's in the record.
All right. Mr. McMichael couldn't tell you Ahmaud Arbery's name, could he?
Correct.
Because he said he didn't know his name, didn't he?
Correct.
All right. Well, let's go on with that page to get further context here. You go on to ask him, I'm at line 14, you were the first one to see him? That was a question from you. And Mr. McMichael said, yeah, well, I guess. I don't know if somebody else saw him running, think anything about it. But when he came past my house...
Objection. Mr. Hoag is just now reading this section as opposed to asking this officer what it is. In addition, it has absolutely nothing to do, it's not the real completeness, it has nothing to do with what was above at all.
I understand we're talking about context for statements. I understand these are the words of Greg McMichael. They've come in a couple different ways. Let's get to the context question. How's that? Let's make sure. Let's get to the question part of it.
This is a question. This is what Greg McMichael was saying to you immediately after telling you he didn't know the name of the person he saw running in his neighborhood, right? That's the context of what we're talking about. Correct?
As far as line 16 on?
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And so what I'm doing with you, Investigator Nohili, is I'm just reading the words on the transcript and you're affirming, yes, that's what Greg McMichael said to me. That's the form of all these questions. All right, you with me?
Yes.
Okay, good deal. So going on, he says, but when he came past my house, he met the description of the guy that Travis had seen run in that empty house, 2 weeks ago or however long ago it was. You say, yeah. And Mr. McMichael, so far I'm reading accurately, am I not?
Yes.
And then at line 23, Greg McMichael, I mean, to a T. Plus he met the description of the video I had seen of this guy being in there. Short dreads, and go over to line 1 on page 60, you say, yeah. And then Mr. Greg McMichael says, white t-shirt, short pants, plus he was hauling ass. And this, he was running like people don't run normally. He wasn't out for no Sunday jog. He was getting the hell out of there. I read all that accurately?
Yes.
Now in context, even though he's told you he doesn't know this person's name, he's telling you, in effect, why he suspected him and then
Objection.
chased him.
Question, characterization.
That's sustained.
Okay, you understood what he was talking about, right? I mean, you were involved in the conversation, and the words he was conveying back to you in response to your questions to him were understandable to you, were they not? You knew what he was talking about.
Yes.
Okay, very good, sir. Now, let's go over to page 65, the other part of the transcript the state just reviewed with you. They read the part on 65, page 3, line 3 rather, down to line 16. And at line 16 is where the conversation was in the middle of Greg McMichael's comments to you about Ahmaud Arbery, where he said, this guy, he was in good shape. Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay. And then he goes on to say, in that same context, completing his thoughts to you, and there was no hesitation on his part when he came to Travis. His intention was to grab that gun and probably shoot Travis. That's in my mind. That's what I saw, you know. And with that in mind, if he'd had gotten that shotgun and there was any separation between Travis and him, I was going to cap his ass. And you understood he was describing to you the fight right at the very end of the confrontation that you perhaps had seen on video by this point. Is that what you understood the context of this to be?
I'm going to object as to his understanding of the context is. These are just the words of Greg McMichael. His understanding is not relevant.
Well, then that is the context in which he's saying these words. He's describing the final encounter between Ahmaud Arbery and Travis, and that he thought Ahmaud was trying to get the shotgun away from Travis to shoot him with it. That's what he's telling you, right?
Objection, counsel is now testifying.
So let's, again, this statement is coming through the witness. The statement's in. For context, you can ask the witness what he believes he was describing, but let's let the words, Mr. McMichael, what?
All right, for context, Investigator Nohilly, you understand what he's describing, right?
Yes.
And you understood what he was describing was his own thoughts that he was about to see his own son shot and killed by Ahmaud Arbery with his own shotgun.
Objection calls for speculation as to what this means by Greg McMichael.
At this point, we're simply asking what the witness understood based on his interview with with Mr. McMichael. Go ahead.
You need me to repeat it? You're allowed to
Repeat it,
answer.
please.
Okay. In the context of this conversation, you understood Greg McMichael to be telling you that what he thought when he was watching Ahmaud Arbery attack his son.
Objection, mischaracterization. Counsel's testifying that is not at all what Greg McMichael said. Didn't use the word attack at all.
Okay, I'll use his words. His intention was to grab that shotgun and probably shoot Travis. That's in my mind. Those were his words, right?
Yes.
And you understood that what he was conveying to you was that he thought he was about to witness his son's death at the hands of Ahmaud Arbery.
Objection, speculation.
Yeah, the statement speaks for itself. It's sustained.
All right. Go over to page 67. See if we can get through this one.
State objection, anything on 67? We didn't bring up 67. That's not something he's testified to at all. So there is no rule of completeness here. This is a completely different page and topic.
That's not the case, Your Honor, and if I need to defend it without the jury here, I'd like to do so.
Let me go ahead and see what it is.
Let me see if I have notes written on here.
I'll show it. I'm bringing my computer.
Does anyone just have a clean copy of it? That's the easiest way to do it. Nobody's got a clean copy of page 67?
Yes, Judge, I do have something about it for you. Yes. It's just
We
this.
have one.
That's what you have. Well, that's true. Detective, could you hand that to the judge?
That's the web page.
Problem is, every time I move, I pull a cord out.
Your Honor, I'm at page 67, lines 8 through 17.
8 through 18 on 67, you said?
Page 67, lines 8 through 17.
Through 17. Okay. I'll permit the question. Go ahead.
Now, before we read it, Investigator Nohilly, in your 20 years experience and in your training and education, you've heard of a phenomenon before called auditory exclusion, where a person is so focused in a traumatic event, their vision might...
Objection. Counsel's testifying. He hasn't even given him an opportunity to say whether he knows what that word auditory, whatever it was, is.
I have him on cross-examination, and leading questions are allowed under 24-6, 611, B and C. We can look that up. These are proper questions.
Okay. Well, you asked him whether he knew what something was, and you're about to define it for him. That's the objection to the question.
To give him the orientation of what I'm talking about. He might know it by some other term. It has several different terms. I've used one of those terms. Do you know auditory exclusion? Have you heard of that one?
I have. I don't recall
Okay.
what it means.
Well, let me help see if this refreshes your recollection. You've heard of it. It's the occasion when a person in a traumatic situation.
Objection. At this point, counsel is testifying by telling him what this means.
It's a leading question.
It's over. Go ahead.
So an auditory exclusion, you're in a traumatic situation, and of your senses, your vision will retain its best abilities, but your hearing and other senses, auditory hearing in particular, might tune out sounds, and you don't hear and you don't recall accurately, but you can also describe what you saw, but not what you heard. That's what you recall from your training. That happens sometimes to people in highly traumatic or unusual situations like a shooting.
I don't recall if that's exactly what I learned.
Is it a phenomenon you're familiar with by whatever name?
The term, yes.
Okay. So let's go to this paragraph here. 67 page, or line 8. You ask Greg McMichael, was he hit all 3 times? Or, now the he is Ahmaud Arbery, right?
Yes.
And the hit means hit with 3 shots from Travis's shotgun, right?
Correct.
And Greg McMichael answers, there was only 2 shots. See that?
Yes.
And you say, no, there were 3, right?
Correct.
And he says, were there 3 shots? Asks you that, right?
Yes.
And you say, on the video, it sounds like there's 3. You'd seen the video, right?
Yes.
Sounds like there's 3. Greg McMichael says, I don't think so. I mean, it may have been 3. I don't know. But like I say, it was a fur ball. It was a hair ball. But he thought he heard 2, and you heard 3, and there's 3 on the video, right?
From what I remember, yes.
Yeah. And when you, you probably arrested many people through your 20-year career, right?
I have.
And when you do that, and you try to keep the person from fleeing from you, you will use verbal commands like stop, don't run, stay where you are, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And if you have to raise your voice to give a stronger verbal command, you will do that.
Yes.
And if the person is still not compliant, you'll sometimes draw your weapon if you need to, won't you?
Only in certain circumstances.
Like when they're not listening to you in your verbal commands, not stopping.
No.
Yeah. Know what?
No, I don't just pull my gun.
Okay. You'll do other steps before you pull your gun to get them to comply with you?
Yes.
Like, what, raising your voice even higher, louder?
Maybe.
All right. Well, you'll do whatever the circumstances require. You're not just gonna forget about it and go home, all right?
Correct?
All right. And if the person is still not complying with your verbal commands, and you're waiting for someone to come back you up, like other police officers, at some point, if you think the person is either going to attack you or flee, you will use your weapon, will you not?
Not always, no.
If the person is attacking you,
Depends on how he's attacking me, or she.
all right, if you have a gun on you and the person is attacking you, you would have a concern that the person might take your gun from you and use it to harm you or kill you?
Once again, it depends on the circumstances and the person.
All right. If the circumstance includes being attacked by someone who seems to be trying to take your gun from you, putting his hands on it, you might use your gun, wouldn't you?
At that point, it might meet the threshold, yes.
Thank you, Investigator Nunilli.
Mr. Sheffield?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Jason Sheffield. I represent Travis McMichael. We haven't spoken before, have we?
I don't believe so.
I'd like to talk generally with you about investigation and your role in this particular investigation. Was it that you were charged with,
Could you pull that microphone?
I will do it.
Thank you so much.
Was it that you were charged with gathering just information from Greg McMichael and Travis McMichael? And that was the sole job that you had in this particular case?
Yes.
Just to perform the interviews?
Yes.
Okay. And you were directed to do so by Investigator Lowry?
I'm not sure exactly. I was told at the scene to go back to the station and do the interviews.
You'll have to speak up just a little bit. You're dropping
I'm sorry.
off. That's,
I was told, I'm not sure exactly by who, I think it was one of my supervisors possibly, to go to the station and do the interviews.
prior to the interviews, though, you had a debriefing with whomever was in charge so that they could give you some background information about what had happened that day based on their observations?
No.
So did you go into these interviews not knowing what had happened out there in Satilla Shores?
Correct.
Literally, you didn't know the
Outside
order of
scene.
events or anything like that?
Right, outside of seeing that video, no.
Okay, so seeing the video, the video that you saw, did it include Mr. Arbery running and then turning around and the driver of the car dropping the phone for about a minute and then it being picked back up and then filming as Mr. Arbery comes around the corner towards the shooting? Or did you just see the shooting
I
portion?
think I just saw the shooting part of it.
Okay, so not even the entire video.
Right, I didn't see the whole video.
Okay, so you're stepping into a situation where you really don't know much other than that there's been a shooting.
Correct.
And did you say you were on the scene that day?
I had gone up to the scene,
You had
yes.
gone, how long were you on the scene before you left to go do interviews?
Like 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, so you're really kind of an open book when you head into these interviews, not having anything in your mind that you're trying to get out of these individuals, just that you're trying to understand what happened.
Correct.
Okay, so in your mind then, you are trying to understand the dynamics of what Greg McMichael and Travis McMichael were doing out there that day,
Correct.
and what Mr. Arbery was doing out there that day,
Correct.
what Greg McMichael's intent was, based on whatever he told you, right?
Correct.
And you conducted an interview of Travis McMichael as well, so what Travis McMichael's intent was out there that day.
I'm going to object at this time. We're not going into Travis McMichael's interview at all. So I don't know why we're talking about it with this witness.
Just asked if he'd done it.
Yeah, he's interviewed Travis McMichael. I'm going to ask him about it. I'm not going to get any statements made.
Okay, all right.
You were trying to determine what Travis McMichael's intent was that day,
Correct.
and what Mr. Arbery's intent was that day.
Correct.
Okay. In doing so, you got some information about ongoing crime in the neighborhood.
I'm going to object. Now we're going into content.
I'll rephrase it so that when you talked to Greg McMichael, you got information that there was some ongoing crime in the neighborhood.
You'll have to direct me to a line. I don't recall exactly.
Okay, just as you sit here, do you recall whether or not you talked with Greg McMichael about crime in the neighborhood?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Did you endeavor after this interview to go and follow up about the crime in the neighborhood, to pull any reports or anything like that?
I don't think it was me that did it. I think I passed that information on to other investigators, and they did.
Okay, that's fine. You didn't do it, that's fine. In stepping into a situation where you're going to be conducting an interview of a person just involved in a violent situation like this one, you have been trained how to interview individuals, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. You have some basic training that you go through about how to interview people. Have you had more advanced training on how to conduct interviews of suspects or people involved in traumatic situations?
I have.
Is it fair to say that it's important to have that training because interviewing someone can be a bit of a chaotic experience?
Correct.
The person that you're interviewing could be all over the map in terms of the timeline of the event.
Correct.
You may have to stop them because it can get very confusing and kind of redirect them back to moments that they can then break down and further explain to you.
Correct.
And is it fair to say that your training has helped you become the person kind of in charge of that process?
Correct.
To help that person through their statement so that it can ultimately be understood by you.
Correct.
Because what you know is that whatever the garbled or asynchronous timeline that you could get needs to be understood eventually by lawyers in the case.
Correct.
So you may have to follow back up on something to get more clarity so that it can be further fleshed out.
Yes.
And not only do you know that the lawyers in the case are going to rely on it, but you know that it's going to be used here in court, possibly.
Correct.
And that the work that you're doing to flush out these subjects and to dig deeper into what's being said is possibly going to need to be understood by the court as well as a jury.
Yes.
All right, so you're going to do your best to try to follow up on things so that the interview that you conduct is as accurate and complete and truthful as it can be.
Correct.
Okay. Now, you did interview Travis.
Yes.
You spent a good bit of time with him, maybe an hour or longer.
Yes.
Okay. He was speaking quickly during that interview at times, wasn't he?
Judge, I'm going to, once again, we're not introducing the statements of Travis McMichael. So going through all of this, I would object as it's not relevant.
Here's what's interesting. He conducted an interview.
I object to his speaking.
Yeah, okay. Let me do, because I think I need to work out exactly what's going on here. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to ask that you go ahead and step into the jury room for just a moment while we address the matters before the court.
All right for the jury. Please be seated.
All right. Sergeant, if I could get you to just step down, if you just step out of the courtroom, we'll bring you back in for further testimony.
Yes, sir.
Okay, somebody give me a little context here.
Sure, at this point in
Well,
time.
hold on. Maybe the better way to do it. Let me explain what I understand and I can say. So Travis McMichael's statement, I'm guessing, is not being used because it's just, there's too many issues to work through with Bruton that it's just not being used. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. Yesterday morning, we informed the defense that we had made a decision not to tender or present any statements of Travis McMichael once they informed us that they basically wanted the entire thing in for rule of completeness. And we made the decision and informed them we're not tendering in Travis McMichael's statement at all, as currently right now hearsay. I talked with Mr. Rubin this morning and I said, listen, I don't even want to go into the fact that he went ahead and interviewed Travis McMichael because we're not tendering it in. Because now the jury is looking at us like we're hiding his statement. And my fear, of course, is that, okay, I'll back up. The state's a little frustrated because the state has endeavored to communicate to the defense that we were not going to put this in. In fact, this morning I told Mr. Rubin, I'm not even going to ask this witness about Travis McMichael's statement at all. I'm going to just strictly have him on the stand to talk about Greg McMichael. I informed them of that. And I was told, that's fine. We can recall him at a time if it becomes necessary, if Travis McMichael takes the stand. So at this point in time, having not gone into it, the state's fear is that it appears to the jury that, oh, there's this statement of Travis McMichael out there, and I've been put in the position of having to object about the contents of it and tell them we're not tendering it, which of course makes it look like the state's hiding this statement from them when that's not the intention. The state's been put in an awkward position. The state would like a curative instruction, and that's what we're asking for.
Okay. So, as I understand it, the state asked to put in certain statements of Travis McMichael. We responded and said we think this helps the rule of completeness. They chose not to put the statement in, and I'm not offering any of his statement. I'm not going to say anything that Travis McMichael said, although there are probably some exceptions under excited utterance. I'm still not putting those in. That being said, the state's decision not to tell the jury that he was even interviewed, that's on them. I'm not hiding something. It would be as if in a car accident case, a police officer testifies about something through the plaintiff and the defense comes up and says, hey officer, didn't you also talk to a witness and didn't you also collect this information and didn't you also investigate these other things? They chose not to bring it up. I'm not doing anything that's untoward. I'm simply informing the jury that, number one, he was interviewed. Number two, certain conduct and behavior was seen by this officer that he voluntarily cooperated in the interview.
Okay, we're not going to get into the problem with asking him about the way he was reacting is it opens the door to what questions were being asked at the time and the context of those reactions, which then possibly gets us into the statement. That's my concern about that. The fact that he was interviewed, that's fine, or the fact that he cooperated is fine. But once we start describing his actions during the interview, I'm not sure how you separate that from what was going on in the interview at the time.
He appeared stressed. He was speaking quickly. Those are my questions.
In an hour-long interview, at what point during the interview, what was he being asked about?
I'm not going to go into that. And the jury's left without the information about it. But Judge, that doesn't make it impermissible. I would say to the court, it doesn't make it impermissible.
The context, because I understand the statement's not coming in. We're not going to talk about it. It's an hour-long statement. I don't know, and the jury doesn't know what was going on at the moments that he could possibly be described, because what you are implying is that during that entire 1 hour period, he was acting exactly the same way.
I can clear that up. I mean, I feel like the court is telling me how to conduct. If the subject matter is relevant, that's my question.
I don't believe it is, because without the statement coming in describing his conduct while giving that statement without explaining what the statement is, the court finds impermissible. So the beginning of this and the end of that, I don't know, the court is going to allow you to go into, but as far as what he was doing, how this officer was perceiving his reactions, we're not going to get into that. Did he cooperate? Sure. Did he give a statement? That's fine.
Will the court allow me to ask the witness the subjects that he inquired of?
No, because then we're getting into the statement.
That he asked about, not what Travis said in response.
Because then we're getting into the statement.
Okay. I think those would be permissible areas, but I'll follow the ruling of the court and I won't ask those questions.
All right. Let's,
Yeah, I would like to say, in light of the state's comments, that it was the Bruton problem that primarily drove their decision not to go into any of Travis McMichael's statement. Bruton problem, of course, being that he would incriminate Greg McMichael. We don't have a Bruton problem in Travis McMichael's statement. There's many parts of it that have been highlighted in yellow that were worked out. It looks to me like every bit as much as was in Greg McMichael's statement that we've just spent part of yesterday and part of today doing. So our position is that for us, I was under the impression that it was probably not going to be introduced because it's so exculpatory, and the state was making the decision, well, he'll have to get up there and tell his story himself. We're not going to do it through our witness. But if it's a Bruton problem, then any issue we have made before regarding Travis McMichael's statement with respect to Bruton, we withdraw. And so that's not an impediment for our client.
Well, that may cure it for the state and they may want to get back up and do it, but I don't know
Your
where we
Honor,
are.
Travis McMichael's statement is hearsay. It would come in if the state chose to tender it as the statement of a party opponent. The state is choosing not to tender it as a statement of a party opponent. So none of those issues apply. It's the state's decision not to tender in that hearsay under that exception.
then it sounds like it doesn't change where the court is on it.
Yeah, and I would ask the court, there's no need for a curative instruction at this point.
Yeah, we're just going to bring the panel
Also,
back in.
real quickly, Judge, I was also going to ask him whether or not Travis demonstrated positions with how he was holding the firearm. And that demonstration, again, I thought would be not a statement, but just in response to the question of how he demonstrated certain things for him. That he cooperated, he demonstrated, he spoke, those kinds of things.
Yeah, no, that's, the court would be consistent. Again, to explain the context of that, you'd have to get into the statement, why he was doing that at a particular time, and what the questions were that led him to that. So again, that gets into the statement itself.
So I will not do it based on the court saying I may not do it. I cannot do it.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Let's go get the witness. Did we lose him? All right, welcome back, Sergeant. All right, you can go ahead and be seated. I'll remind you you're under oath. I say you can be seated. I think you're going to stand up in just a second. Let's go get the panel.
All rise for the jury. Please be seated.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Sheffield.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So, we were talking about that you conducted an interview of Travis McMichael.
Yes.
Yes. And one of the things that you do when you conduct an interview is you want to make sure that the person you interview understands that they don't have to speak to you, right?
Correct?
We call this the Miranda admonition, that they have the right to be silent, right?
Correct?
They have the right to a lawyer.
Objection, at this point in time, we're going into the interview.
I'm just going to Miranda.
I'll give you some flexibility here. Let's.
To be short, Travis agreed to be interviewed.
Yes.
Okay. He cooperated with that interview fully and freely.
Yes.
Now, one of the things you were asked about just a moment ago is Greg's statement to you and Greg's expressions to you about Mr. Ahmaud Arbery and whether he was trying to run or flee or how he could have run or taken other routes or whatnot. You recall that line of questioning by Mr. Hogue?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever undertake it yourself after speaking with Greg McMichael to try to figure out any background on Mr. Arbery?
I would drop the objection.
I did not.
You did not.
Not me.
Not you. But you're aware that others may have.
Yes.
Okay. Lastly, when you've been an officer for how many years, did you say?
Just under 20 years,
20 years, doing patrol.
including patrol, yes.
And you have investigated crimes of break-ins,
I have.
crimes of theft,
I have.
crimes of burglary.
I have.
And one of the things that you've come to understand is that burglary doesn't just happen at night, right?
Correct.
It happens in the middle of the day sometimes,
Yes.
in particular on Sundays.
I don't know if it's particularly on Sundays.
If you look at page 72, isn't that what you discussed with Greg McMichael? Starting at line 10.
Yes.
Usually on Sunday.
Yes,
What you
that's
said.
what I said,
That's what you
yes.
said. Nothing further, thank you.
Anything from Mr. Braun?
No, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Sure. Investigator No Hilly. Right after you said, usually on Sunday, what did Greg McMichael say?
Sorry. That's right, that's right.
Then what did he say?
People are home on Sundays.
People are home on Sundays. All right. And at the time of this interview, this was how many hours after the incident had taken place?
A couple hours, I think. I'm not exactly sure, but it was in within 2 or 3 hours of the incident.
Okay, so 2 or 3 hours of the incident,
Yes.
you believe? Okay. Then we heard.
Anything on those limited issues?
No, Your Honor. No question. No, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You are excused for the day, but subject to recall.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thanks. It's okay early. We need a break.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take a 15-minute recess, and we'll come back for the continuation of evidence in this case.
All rise for adjourned. Please be seated.
All right, if we can have the state's next witness ready to go in 15 minutes, the 10:30. All right, thank you, everybody. Pardon?
I believe it would be Chavez.
Proceed, please.
All right, we are back on. Defendants present, represented by counsel.
There we go.
Oh,
We actually need her for this witness.
all right. As I said, we're back on, represented by counsel. Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Judge.
All right, let's go ahead and get the panel.
So rise with the jury. Please proceed.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are ready to proceed with the evidence in this case from the state.
Thank you, Judge. At this time, the state will call Mr. Matt Albensley.
Just raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, have a seat.
Sir, please state your name and spell it for the record.
Matthew Albenzi. It's MATTHEWALBENZE.
And Mr. Albenze, what neighborhood do you live in?
Satilla Shores.
How long have you lived in Satilla Shores?
Since July '89. 32 years, 33 years. 32 years. 31 years.
All right. And what's the specific address that you live at?
309 Jones Road.
What do you do for a living?
Calibration technician.
And what are the normal hours that you work? Like, when do you leave to go to work? And when do you leave to go to work? And when do you come home?
Leave around 5:30, 5:40 in the morning. Get home around 4:30, 4:45 in the afternoon.
Right. So prior to February of 2020,
Who we got? Is that from your mic?
I don't know, it appears it might be, I'm not sure.
Yeah. That may be it. Just push that maybe just a little bit away from you. Okay, let's try.
Let's try that.
Let's fix it. Okay.
Thank you, Judge. So prior to February of 2020, did you know Mr. William Roddy Bryan?
We'd met before. Yeah.
All right. How many times had you met before?
Just casual passing at a hardware store or maybe up at Zachary's.
How would you describe your relationship with him?
Just an acquaintance.
Had you ever been to his home in Satilla Shores?
No,
Had he ever been to your house in Satilla Shores?
no.
Did you even know where he lived?
Had an idea.
With regard to Greg McMichael, did you know Mr. Greg McMichael prior to February of 2020?
Yes.
How did you know him?
Just neighbors.
Had he ever been over to your house?
No,
Had you ever been over to his house for like dinner or anything?
no.
And Travis McMichael, did you know him?
Yes.
And how did you know Travis McMichael?
Same type of relationship. Just neighbors. We talk in the driveway. I think most of the time we ever spoke with each other in the driveway, just friendly conversation about, you know, trucks and boats and fishing and stuff like that.
All right. And back in February of 2020, you knew where the McMichaels lived.
Yes.
Now, with regard to Mr. Ahmaud Arbery, did you know him?
No.
Had you ever seen him in the neighborhood before?
No.
Had you ever seen him, period, before?
No.
Now, in relationship to your house, where is the open unsecured construction site at 220 Satilla Drive?
It's at the end of the street I live on.
And how long has that location been under construction?
2.5 years maybe at that point. I'm not sure.
Okay, so at that point, 2.5 years. What was there before it became a construction site?
It's the vacant lot.
So I'm going to show you what I've marked as State's Exhibits 284 and 285. Take a look at 284 and 285 and see if you're able to recognize what's depicted in those photographs.
Yep.
Are they fair and accurate?
Yeah.
At this time, the state would tender into evidence 284 and 285.
No objection.
No objection.
They're admitted.
So, Mr. Albenzi, you'll be able to see it here on your screen. So we're looking at 284. What is the jury looking at here?
That's the Mr. English's house, just above the garbage cans there.
Right here?
Yeah, and that and to the right.
So all of this being English's property.
Yes.
All right. And so where are we kind of standing looking down the street?
You'd be about at the end of my driveway, I think, approximately.
All right. And what road is this road, right?
Jones Road.
Now, whose house is this?
Kenny Wade.
All right. What, do you know what Mr. Wade does?
No, I think he's retired.
So then looking at 285, is this just a further close-up shot?
Yes.
Great. It's just our court reporter needs to take down everything we're saying. Thanks. Now, do you know Larry English personally?
We've met, yeah. I introduced myself. It's my mailbox. There's the white mailbox here. So I walk down there every afternoon and check my mail.
So that's your mailbox?
Yeah.
Okay. So how many times do you think you've met or talked with Larry English prior to February 23rd of 2020?
Half a dozen, 10 times, maybe a dozen, I'm not sure.
He ever come to your house? You ever go to his house?
No, I talked to him either at the mailbox or, spoke to him in his backyard. He had an excavator putting some concrete on the riverbank, just like that, yeah.
All right. And had you ever seen various people at his open unsecured construction site?
Maybe some contractors every now and then.
Any looky-loos, people just stopping by to look at the property? No, you didn't see that.
No, I did not see that.
Okay. And from about October of 2019 through February of 2020, what condition was the open unsecured construction site? Was it like fully open that you could walk in?
Yeah, no garage doors, I don't think the front door was on it.
Were there any no trespassing signs up?
I don't know.
Now, at some point in time, when you talked with Larry English, did he show you a video? Did he show you a video of someone who had come onto his property at night?
Yes.
And what was that person doing?
I was looking around, walking around on his dock.
The dock video.
Yes.
Did he show you any other videos other than the dock video?
No.
Do you remember what day it was that he showed this video to you? No?
Maybe October, November timeframe of 19.
And at any point in time, did Larry English talk to you about items that had been stolen off of his boat, like some fishing equipment and a cooler?
Yes.
All right, and who did he suspect had taken those things?
He didn't really say. He just told me there had been some contractors work.
Object to hearsay from Mr. English, what he told this witness. Sister.
Now, did you repeat what Mr. English had told you to anyone else?
Not that I recall, no.
All right, I'm going to direct your attention, Mr. Albenze, specifically to February 23rd, 2020, approximately 1 p.m. in the afternoon. Tell the jury what you were doing that day.
I was running a log splitter in my front yard, splitting wood.
And how were you dressed?
I had on boots and gloves and overalls.
What did you see?
I just stood up to move some wood, and I noticed Mr. Arbery standing in the front yard of that house.
Now, at that point in time, did you know his name?
No.
Okay, so he was a stranger to you.
Yes.
All right, so you saw him standing in front of the house.
Yes.
How was he dressed?
Maybe a t-shirt and shorts.
Did he have any bags with him?
No, not that I recall, no.
Backpack on him?
No.
What did you see the young man do?
He was just standing there looking around. It's a good distance away.
So what did you decide to do? What happened next?
What came to mind was Mr. English's video. Something that looked like that on his dock at night. So I shut the splitter off, grabbed my phone, walked down to the corner.
And did you go in the house and get something else too?
Yeah, I had a pistol in my pocket.
Okay. So you got your phone, you got your gun, and you walked down to the end of the drive, or the end of the street.
Right.
All right. So on State's Exhibit 285, where did you stand?
Behind that oak tree next to the stop sign.
So right in here?
Behind the oak tree.
Like right here?
Yeah. Well, behind it, but the tree was between myself and the house.
Ah, so more like right here.
Yeah.
Got it. And what did you do then?
And I saw someone moving around inside the house, so I pushed the send button, called Glenn County Police.
All right, so when you hit the send button, what number did you dial?
The 7800 number.
What's the 7800 number?
It's the Glenn County Police Department.
So you didn't dial 911?
No,
All right. Why didn't you dial 911?
I did not see an emergency.
So you dialed the non-emergency Glenn County number, and were you connected to an operator?
I was.
Have you had the opportunity to listen to that 911 call?
I've heard it a time or two, yeah.
Okay. And you and I have met before, right?
Right,
And
yes.
I played for you?
Yes, you did.
Okay. And at that time, was it a fair and accurate depiction of what you said to 911?
Evidently, it's a recording, so, yeah.
All right. So, Your Honor, at this time, the state will tender into evidence. I'll make sure I get the right number. State's Exhibit 143.
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection.
It's admitted.
Statement published.
Plymouth Communications Operator Smith.
Hey, this is Battle Avenger. I'm about to steal short. This is a great place out there. There's a guy in the house right now. It's a house under construction.
Okay, do you have your address or that house's address?
Right at 219 or 220 Secilla Drive.
And you said someone's breaking into it right now?
No, it's all open. It's under construction. And he's running right now. There he goes right now.
Okay, what is he doing?
He's running down the street. Oh,
Okay.
back there, didn't he?
Okay, that's fine. I'll get them out there. I just need to know what he was doing wrong. Was he just on the premises and not supposed to be?
And he's been caught on camera a bunch before at night. Kind of an ongoing thing out here. The man's building a house. He's got parties. He's out there. He's not going to finish it.
Okay, that's fine. And you said it was a male in a black t-shirt?
A white t-shirt. Black guy with a t-shirt. And he's done back there. He's done running back there. You never knew.
Okay, and
My front yard.
what was your name, sir?
Matt.
Okay, and your phone number?
258-46 something.
258. What was the last four?
46 something. I'm at 309 Jones Road.
Okay, I'll go ahead and put it in and have somebody come out there and check it out, okay?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Were you able to see Mr. Arbery inside the house when you were standing behind kind of the oak tree area?
Yeah,
Could you tell what he was doing inside the house?
no.
Now, you can't read minds, right?
Nope,
All right. So you have no idea what he was doing inside the house.
no ma'am.
And do you have any idea why he ran from the house?
No, I don't.
Now, after you hung up with 911, what happened next?
Walked back to my house.
Do you recall at all walking down the street a little further in front of, I guess, Subi Lawrence on one side and Diego Perez on the other side, down that street a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you remember making any sort of motion?
I saw in the video, there he goes.
And who are you doing that to?
I was just thinking to myself, run on down the street.
Were you intending to communicate to anyone in particular at that time?
No.
And after you stood in the street and made the arm motion, what did you do then?
Went home.
At any point in time, did you call Greg or Travis McMichael?
No.
Did you communicate with them in any way, shape, or form?
No.
After you went home, what happened next?
After a few minutes, I heard gunshots.
How many gunshots did you hear?
3.
What did you do once you'd heard those 3 gunshots?
I got my bicycle out of the shop and rode down around the corner.
When you say down the corner, where'd you go?
Down to Satilla Drive, left.
So you came down Jones and then went down Satilla.
Right,
Is that the same way that Mr. Arbery had run?
yes.
What'd you find?
I saw a police car, saw Mr. Arbery laying on the street. I saw Miss Greg and Travis there.
What'd you do?
I stopped and went home. As you know, it's kind of a shocking scene, you know.
And did you ride your bicycle back home?
I did.
Later that evening, were you contacted by officers from the Glenn County Police Department?
Yeah,
And did you speak with them at that time?
I suppose, yeah, I did.
Do you recall that at all?
Not really.
At that point in time, just to put it politely, had you had an adult beverage or cocktail at that point in time?
Several, yeah.
Now, have you personally ever been the victim of property theft within Satilla Shores?
My daughter's car was broken into, gosh, 20 years ago maybe. It's been a long time ago.
But nothing in 2019 or 2020?
No,
And do you subscribe to the Satilla Shores Facebook page?
yeah,
Do you occasionally post there?
yeah,
And do neighbors post about their concerns about crime in the neighborhood on that Facebook page?
yeah, they did.
And is that normal for people to be concerned about property thefts and crime in a neighborhood?
Objection is asking this witness to speculate what other people feel.
Sustained.
Were you concerned about property thefts in Satilla Shores?
Of course,
Why?
it's our home.
Now, did you have any personal knowledge about any burglaries that had taken place in Satilla Shores in 2019 or 2020?
Car break-ins, you mean? That,
So we'll talk about, did you know about some car break-ins?
yeah.
And how did you find out about the car break-ins?
It's on the Facebook page.
Had anybody actually personally spoken to you about their car break-in, like one-on-one, and you interviewed them and you got information about it?
No.
And I think to show you State's Exhibit 127. 127. So Mr. Albenzi, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 127, see if you're able to recognize this particular image.
I do.
All right, and is it fair and accurate?
Was then, yeah.
All right. At this time, the state would tender into evidence State's Exhibit 127.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
It's admitted.
So with regard to State's Exhibit 127, go ahead and orient the jury. Where are we?
You're facing south on Satilla Drive.
And so when you were standing behind the oak tree, was it about here?
Yes,
All right. And you said this was fair and accurate at the time, meaning back in spring of 2020.
right. The porta potties are gone now.
But it was there back then.
Yeah.
Have me a moment. Mr. Albenzi, I'm going to pass you over to the defense. They may have some questions for you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Root.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Mr. Albenzi, we've met before.
Yes,
We met about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago now,
I suppose,
out near your house.
yes,
Okay, we talked about the testimony you're giving here today.
yes, sir.
Okay. You don't want to be here.
Rather be elsewhere, yes.
Almost anywhere else, probably. This has been very difficult for you, correct?
Yeah,
It's caused you personally some problems as a result of your role in calling 911.
yes, it is.
You've had some concerns at work.
Yes,
You've had concerns about your neighborhood, Satilla Shores,
yes,
and even personal attacks on you, phone calls, things like that,
recently, yes.
recently. Even though all you did was call 911,
Not 911, but, yeah,
the non-emergency number.
right.
Okay. And that's put you in a difficult spot in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's put me in a spot. I wouldn't say it's really difficult, but it is something I'm not used to.
Okay. Well, let's talk about your your call to Glenn County Police Department for a second and orient the jury a little bit. When you were in your yard cutting the wood, you'd already gotten most of the tree done. You were continuing to split logs from a fallen tree in your yard.
Right,
Right? You're out in your front yard, and you can see down from your house down towards Larry English's house.
right,
Now, you had talked to Larry English before, right?
yes.
You said 6 to 12 times, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah.
You shared mailboxes with him.
Well, it's
I don't mean the same mailboxes.
same area, yeah.
So there's a group of mailboxes at the end of the road. Right here, behind the stop sign.
Right.
Okay.
4 or 5 mailboxes.
And multiple neighbors have to go to that spot to get their mail every day.
Yes,
You have to walk down Jones to the corner of Jones and Satilla to get your mail.
yes.
And of course, Mr. English has a mailbox there as well.
I don't think he has a mailbox yet.
Oh, okay, he didn't have one yet, but that's where you would see him and talk to him occasionally.
Yes,
Okay. And on those occasions when you would see him, y'all would discuss, how's the construction coming, how's things going, right?
right,
You knew he had a heart problem,
yeah,
so you knew his health was impaired.
yeah,
You knew he was building the house as kind of a second home for him.
yes,
You knew he lived some distance away.
right,
And you knew he stored valuables on the property.
I suppose,
You knew he had a boat on the property.
right,
You knew he had a camper on the property.
yeah,
You knew he stayed in the camper when he would come to work on the house.
right,
And the garage where he kept the boat, he had a regular car garage, but he also had an RV garage, the bigger garage,
right,
to fit his boat or an RV or whatever he wanted to put in it.
yes,
Okay. He had talked to you about this intruder in his house, right?
yes,
And he even went so far as to show you the video of a black male behind his house on his dock.
right.
And you understood that on the dock was a boat on a hoist.
I don't know if I can't tell you what was on the, no, I don't know the arrangement of his dock, no.
Okay, so you weren't aware there was a boat back there.
Right, I couldn't tell you if the boat was on the dock or in the garage or where at the time.
Did you know if Mr. English had multiple boats?
Yeah, I think he had 2 or 3 boats
Okay. That he stored on the property.
from time to time.
Even though it was open and unsecured, this house, it was still his property as you understood it.
Right.
He wasn't inviting people to come onto the property when he's not there, right?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
This male he showed you in the video, did Mr. English tell you he was authorized to be on the dock?
No,
Okay. As far as you understood, he was not authorized to be on the dock.
that's right.
And you understood that even though the house had no doors on it, it was still Mr. English's property, right?
Yes,
And he could decide who's allowed to come and not come on the property.
yes,
You were aware that, and you even tell the Glenn County Police, this guy, meaning the man you're seeing on the property on February 23rd, has been to the house multiple times.
and that's what it said on the call, but it might have been the heat of the moment. And, you know, I can't say who it was, that guy, or just somebody that looks like it's what I probably meant to say.
Okay, so you didn't know who that male was standing in the yard when you looked down Jones.
No,
But to you, he looked like the guy you had seen in the video.
right,
And you knew that this guy who you saw in the video had actually been to the house not just that one time, but a bunch of times.
right,
Again, you didn't know if it was the same guy, but it was enough to pique your interest to walk down Jones.
yes, sir.
Okay. In fact, you tell the Glenn County non-emergency number he's been caught on the camera a bunch before at night. That's what you said in the call we just heard.
That's what I said, yeah.
Okay? It's kind of an ongoing thing out here
It had been.
from that guy, or at least the guy
I
you
can't
suspected.
say it was that guy, just somebody that fit that description.
Okay. So you felt like this guy had been there before, you saw a video of it, and he's here again. Or at least you suspected he's here again.
I suppose,
Okay. And that's what you told the police.
yeah.
Okay. You also told the police that the guy's building a house, the guy being Larry English, and he's
Right.
got heart issues.
Right,
Again, information you got from Mr. English.
right,
Okay. And you knew of Mr. English's frustration at this guy, or the guy you saw in the video, not being caught.
I don't really know, but we'd call it frustration. I can't speak to the man's state of mind, no.
Did he ever explain to you how frustrated he was?
I don't recall.
Okay.
I mean, nobody's happy when somebody snoops around in their stuff, so.
Right, I mean,
But
he
no,
was not happy this man was on his dock.
I suppose not.
Express that to you?
I don't recall.
You say to the Glenn County police operator, we've had some break-ins out here, right?
Right,
One of the first things you said, this is Matt Albenzi, we've had some break-ins out here.
right.
Okay. Now, what you're talking about is what Ms. Dunikoski asked you. You were aware from the Facebook page that there was property crime in the neighborhood.
Yes,
And people were posting about it on the Facebook page and next door page if you're aware of that.
right.
Okay. Do you subscribe to both?
I think I logged into that, but I can't get back into it. It's just kind of wonky. No.
Okay. But people had shared their own personal experience with property crimes in Satilla Shores.
Right,
And it seemed to be an ongoing problem in 2019, now 2020.
it was, yeah.
Around the same time that this man that you saw on the video was coming into Larry English's house.
Right,
And in fact, not only were you aware of it, but many people in the neighborhood were aware of this intruder in Larry English's house.
Same objection Mr. Reed did to me. What other people are aware of would be speculation on this person's, on Mr. Albenza's part.
Sustained.
Did you ever tell the GBI when you were interviewed that everyone in the neighborhood is aware of it?
Not a prior consistent statement or prior inconsistent statement. And once again, him saying it to someone else does not get it out of speculation on his part.
The question is simply whether he was,
Told the GBI. when he
whether
was
he
interviewed.
told the GBI that. Okay, that's okay, go ahead.
Do you remember being interviewed by the GBI?
I do.
Do you remember telling the GBI that you're aware of the guy back at the house and everyone in the neighborhood was aware of it?
I can't say everybody, but it was, people that were posting things, neighbors talk to neighbors, so I suppose most neighbors were aware that there were break-ins occurring.
And not just break-ins, but break-ins at Larry English's house.
I don't know who knew about that, but
You may not know who in particular were aware of it, but you told the GBI that everyone in the neighborhood was aware of. And I understand that's a figure of speech,
right,
but you told the GBI that,
okay, yeah.
correct?
Yep,
Okay. You were also aware that not only was this black male on the dock and at Larry English's house on multiple occasions, but that things were missing from Mr. English's house.
right,
In fact, you were aware that electronics were stolen and a cooler was stolen.
Objection to what Larry English told him. I know the form of the question is you're aware of this, but the only way Mr. Albenzi would be aware of this is if it was hearsay coming from Mr. English. And I believe Mr. Rubin previously objected to my asking this witness what Mr. Larry English told him. So anything he's aware of from Mr. English would come from Mr. English, it would be hearsay.
And I'm not asking, I'm not offering it for the truth of the matter, whether the items were actually stolen, but to go to this witness's knowledge and to explain why he did what he did on February 23rd.
I understand it's not being admitted for the truth of the statement itself, just to explain the witness. Go ahead.
Okay. So, Mr. Albenzi, you had knowledge, you were aware that items were stolen from Mr. English's house.
yes,
And items were in his boat stored at the house.
right,
And those items were electronics, right?
yep,
And a Yeti cooler.
yep,
And so you were aware of, well, let me back up. To your knowledge, those items had never been recovered.
I do not know.
Okay. Were you present at Mr. English's house on February 11th, 2020, when police arrived at the house?
I think I walked down, saw the blue lights, they flash all over the place. I went down there to see what's going on,
And this is at night.
right?
It's dark out.
Yeah, yeah.
Same, it was dark from the video you saw. I'm sorry, I'm going back to the previous video from Mr. English's house. It was dark that time too.
I can't remember if there was lighting. I don't know if there's a lamp back there. I don't recall.
But it was at night.
It was at night.
Okay, so now February 11th, 2020, you see blue lights in front of Mr. English's house at 220 Satilla Drive, correct?
Right.
You were curious.
I was.
You knew about Mr. English's previous problems
Yeah.
with theft at his house, right? So you went down to see what was going on.
Right.
Did you see Travis McMichael down there?
Can't remember if he was there or not. I think he was there.
Okay. Did you see Greg McMichael there?
I don't remember.
Okay. But you do remember Travis?
Pretty sure.
Do you remember talking to any officers there?
I do remember talking to one officer.
After you went down there on the 11th, did you have any more conversations with Larry English about his house?
I don't recall.
Okay. Did you ever talk to Sue B. Lawrence about the thefts in the neighborhood?
Possibly.
You're friends with Miss Lawrence, or at least neighborhood acquaintances?
Yeah, neighborly friends.
Diego Perez,
Yeah,
Ronnie Olson,
yeah.
and Ronnie lives at the corner.
Right. That's
was-
Ronnie's garbage cans there.
Right, so the property, the oak tree where you stood behind to make your call, this is right in Ronnie Olson's front yard.
That's right.
And if Mr. English is 220 Satilla Drive, Ronnie Olson is 219 Satilla, across from Mr. English.
Yes, he is.
Okay. Do you ever talk to Brooke Perez
Occasionally.
about theft in the neighborhood?
I don't know what all we talked about.
Okay. The man you saw in the videos that Larry English showed you, and the man you saw on February 23rd, 2020, you had not seen either of those men before in the neighborhood.
No.
Okay. You never saw either man, if they're different, to your knowledge, jogging in the neighborhood. Now, how long you've lived there? 32 years?
Yeah.
Okay. Not aware of that man or a man fitting that description jogging in the neighborhood?
No.
Okay. The man that you saw when you first saw him on February 23rd was not jogging.
No.
In fact, he was just standing in the yard.
That's right.
Did you see him look around?
It seemed like he was just looking around.
Okay. Wasn't bent over, out of breath?
No.
Wasn't tying his shoes, lacing them up?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay. You didn't know if that man was armed or not?
No.
Okay. Before you went down to make your phone call at the corner of Satilla and Jones, you grabbed two things.
Yep.
Cell phone
Yep.
and your 9mm.
That's right.
You put the 9mm in your pocket.
I did.
That's for your protection.
Yep.
Because you just didn't know what was going on there.
Nope.
Okay. You called 911. You called the non-emergency number. And as you're calling, you're looking at the house.
Right.
And you see a person in the house.
I saw the person, then I called.
Okay, saw a person through the window of the house.
Right.
The window, I'm trying not to get in anybody's way. The front of the house is over here. Here's the garages, right?
Right.
The window's over here.
Right.
You saw the man that you suspected as being an intruder walking through the house through those windows.
Right.
At some point, you stepped out from behind the oak tree,
Right.
and that man came out and then took off.
Yeah.
You suspected he saw you, and that's why he took off.
I don't know.
I know you don't know, but you suspected it.
I don't know why he took off running. I don't know if he saw me or not.
You told Diego Perez you suspected he saw you,
Okay, then.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. And you told the GBI that you suspected he saw you. At least was possible in your mind, and you felt some guilt over that
I did.
because you felt like you put into motion these events that turned tragic.
I thought maybe if he hadn't seen me, he wouldn't have run away. I don't know.
Right. And that, of course, it still weighs heavy on your heart.
Yes.
Okay. After while you were making your call, and you watched him run off into the neighborhood, right? You continued to walk down Satilla, past Mr. Wade's house, who's right there,
Right.
to at least in front of Diego Perez's house, right?
Right.
So that's 2 houses down from Larry English's house.
Right.
And that's where you made your motion,
Right.
right? At that point, you're only 2 houses from the McMichaels house, correct?
2 or 3, I suppose, yeah.
Okay. Prior to Ahmaud Arbery, the man we now know to be Ahmaud Arbery, running out of the house, did you ever see him through the window duck down?
I don't
No, I don't know.
You don't recall?
I don't recall.
Okay. Excuse me 1 minute, Mr. Albans. Thank you, Judge. That's all I have, Mr. Albans.
Hold on just a second, sir. Anything from the other defendants?
Yes, Your Honor.
Good morning, Mr. Albenzi.
Morning.
I'm Jessica Burton. I am co-counsel for Roddy Bryan. First, I understand you might know my co-counsel, Kevin Goff.
I helped my brother clean some trees up at his yard after one of the hurricanes several years ago.
Okay, so then you have not spoken with Mr. Goff then about your testimony today?
No,
Okay. Did you speak with Roddy Bryan on February 23rd, 2020 prior to the incident?
no,
Okay. And at that point, you hadn't spoken with him for several years at that point, is that correct?
I suppose that's correct.
Okay. And on February 23rd, 2020, prior to the incident, you also did not see him,
No.
correct? Okay. That's all I have for you. Thank you.
Any redirect from the state?
Yes, Judge. So when we're talking about what you're aware of with regard to Larry English, you were aware that he suspected his contractors of stealing the items off the boat.
I wouldn't say he suspected them, but maybe that was a possibility.
And how'd you learn about that possibility?
I mean, we spoke about it.
And you're aware that he had no idea if the items were stolen off the boat while the boat was at that construction site or somewhere else?
I have no idea.
Okay. And you don't know what's in the mind of the other neighbors within the Satilla Shores neighborhood, do you?
No.
You have no idea who knows what about Larry English's property, do you?
No.
And the video he showed you was the one on the dock, and I think you said between October and November?
Yeah.
Okay. I think defense counsel asked you if you were friends with Subi Lawrence.
Right.
Okay. But I think it was unclear. Did you talk to Subi Lawrence at all about Larry English's house?
I don't recall. We don't speak very often.
Okay. And Diego Perez, you know him.
Right.
Did you talk with him about Larry English's house?
I may have, but I couldn't tell you what the conversation was or when it was or what it was about. But I mean, we talk about these things, you know, neighbors share concerns about what's going on.
Okay. But you don't have any specific recollections of these things?
No.
Okay. And Ronnie Olson is one of your good friends, right?
His buddy, yeah.
Okay. And at one point in time, did you and Mr. Olson believe that the crime that was happening at Satilla Shores was due to a homeless guy under a bridge?
I don't know. I heard people talk about homeless people under the bridge. I never saw them. Don't know.
Okay. But this was something else that the people in the neighborhood were talking about, right?
Right.
Okay. And that homeless guy under the bridge, he was a suspect in the 2019 entering autos, right?
I don't know.
Well, did you suspect him?
No. I mean, I don't even know if there was a homeless guy under the bridge, so no.
So this is all just rumor and innuendo going around.
I suppose. Yeah.
Now, you just testified, you don't know if Mr. Arbery saw you or not from inside the house where you're standing under the tree, right?
No, I don't.
Okay. And you told Diego Perez that you didn't know whether he saw you or not. Is that what you told Diego Perez?
I don't remember what I told Diego.
Okay. And the direction Mr. Arbery ran when he left the house, he went towards the McMichael house, right?
Yes,
Okay. If he'd gone the other way, where would he have gone?
out towards Highway 17.
Out towards Highway 17,
Right,
out of Satilla Shores.
right.
I'll pass the witness if there's any recross.
Any recalls?
Hello, Mr. Albenzi.
Hello.
Just a quick question.
Objection.
It's two separate defendants.
Pardon me?
Right, there were no questions and.
I can do it.
Okay, I'll let Mr. Rubin do it then.
I'm confused, Frank's. Okay. I'm confused, but I guess it doesn't matter.
Well, it does. What we had was a cross by Mr. Rubin, no cross, and then we'll discuss it at break and just make sure everybody's on the same page with how we're operating. Go ahead.
Mr. Albenzi, the direction you saw the man we now know as Ahmaud Arbery run was to your left, right?
Yes,
Away from the entrance to Satilla Shores Highway 17.
yes,
You're on the phone calling the police to come to the neighborhood and check this out. The police would be coming from the direction of Highway 17,
yes,
coming into the neighborhood.
right.
Going down the street, again, in the direction that Mr. Arbery ran.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Anything from Mr. Brown?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You may step down. I know with the police witnesses, they were subject to recall. Is he subject to recall?
Yes, he is subject to recall.
You are released for the day. You are subject to recall.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Trying to work through timing.
Yes, Judge. I believe our next witness will be Stephen Lowry, and I think he's going to take a while.
I would say so. Maybe this would be a good time to put another matter on the record.
We could get into him for an hour and then break for lunch, whichever the court pleases.
Well, I was planning to break, I was thinking around noon. I think that works from a timing standpoint. I don't plan to get into a full hour. So that being the case, I plan to break the witness in about 30 minutes or so.
That's fine, Judge.
All right, state's next witness.
The state called Stephen Lowry.
Swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Go ahead and have a seat.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Please go ahead and introduce yourself to the jury. Tell them your name and spell it for the court reporter.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Stephen Lowry. It's STEPHANLOWREY.
And Mr. Lowry, how are you currently employed?
I do contract work at a local business for computer repairs.
Okay.
It's part-time.
Part-time. Are you also in school at the moment?
Yes, ma'am. I'm a full-time student.
Okay, and what are you studying?
Network operations and security. It's more computer stuff.
Computer stuff. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
How long have you held your current job?
I started there in May.
In May of
This year.
2021?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What were you doing before that?
I worked at FedEx for a short while as a courier, and prior to that, I was in law enforcement.
Okay. Where were you employed when you were in law enforcement?
Originally with BPD, Brunswick Police Department, and then Glenn County PD.
How long were you with Brunswick PD?
I think roughly like 4.5 or 5 years.
Okay. Do you recall when you started with them?
Late 2012,
2012. Okay, so about 4 to 5 years, you said?
somewhere in there, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what did you do when you were with Brunswick PD?
Mostly patrol. I was assigned to narcotics for a while and a aggressive patrol division.
Okay. So mostly dealing with like drug cases, narcotics.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. After you left Brunswick PD, where did you go?
I went to Glenn County. I was already working out of that building because we shared an office. It was a joint drug unit.
Okay.
And I remained working as a drug investigator for the county for another, I think, 8 or 9 months before I went back to patrol.
Okay. Do you remember when you started in terms of the year with Glenn County PD?
I don't for sure.
Okay. All right. So when you started with Glenn County PD, what was your position there?
A narcotics investigator.
Okay. I want to turn your attention to February 23rd, 2020. Okay?
Okay.
Were you with Glenn County PD at that time?
I was.
Okay. What was your position at that time?
Criminal investigator.
Okay. And were you with a specific department?
Yes, ma'am. The Glenn County PD.
Okay. Department within that agency?
Division. The criminal investigation division.
Okay. All right. And can you just please tell the jurors what were your primary duties?
Investigating crimes that surpassed, I guess, what patrol officers could handle with their equipment and their training.
Okay. And were you post-certified at that time?
Yes.
Does that essentially mean that you had arrest powers under Georgia law?
Yes.
Okay. Now, before February 23rd of 2020, had you worked homicide cases?
I'd assisted with some, but never any of my own.
Never any of your own?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you remember how many you had assisted with?
Not
like
many.
a ballpark number?
Maybe between 1 and 5. I don't think we had many.
Okay, so between 1 and 5 homicide cases.
Yes, maybe that's very, very rough.
Okay. And homicide meaning someone's dead?
Well, I can think of one that I did work on just in the sense of someone being dead, but it was a drug sale kind of thing.
Okay, all right. And were you the lead on any of these homicide cases?
The drug overdose case I was, but that wasn't kind of what I was thinking of with homicide. I've never had a homicide involving like prior to this, any sort of, I guess, violent act, touching, shooting, or anything like that.
Okay, so no shooting homicide. Is that correct?
Yes.
And no like stabbing homicide?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So did you become, actually, strike that, how many citizens arrest cases had you worked prior to February 23rd, 2020?
None.
None, okay. Did you become involved in the investigation into the death of Ahmaud Arbery?
I did.
Can you tell us how you became involved in that?
Yes, I was the on-call investigator that day. I was called out to the scene.
And which day are we talking about?
February 23rd of 2020.
Okay. So do you remember what time you were called out?
I don't. I think it was somewhat early afternoon.
Okay, so early afternoon.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you remember who called you out?
Believe it was Sergeant Oliver.
Sergeant Oliver. Okay. So when you're called out, what do you do?
I got dressed in my uniform, got into my car, and responded to the scene.
Okay. When you say uniform, describe that for us.
At the time, it was, for us in CID, it was khaki BDU pants and a green polo.
Okay.
With a county badge and, yeah.
I'm sorry, I spoke over you. Go ahead.
Just a green polo with a county badge.
Okay. Were you wearing any kind of body cam?
No.
Okay. Explain why not.
The body cams we were using a fix with magnets. I wasn't wearing a plate carrier that had my magnet inside of it, so I wasn't recording.
Okay. And what car were you driving? Did you drive to the scene?
It would have been an unmarked county car. I don't remember the make and model, but it was probably a Ford Fusion.
Okay. And when you say unmarked, what does that mean?
It's equipped with police equipment like lights, sirens, all that, but it's unmarked. It doesn't have Glenn County PD markings or any police markings.
Okay. And was that car equipped with dash cam?
No.
Okay. So no dash cam on that day?
Correct.
Okay. So Where was this scene located that you were called out to?
In Satilla Shores here in Glenn County.
Okay. And when you arrived on scene, tell the jury what it looked like. What did you see?
I arrived on scene. I saw the decedent laying in the roadway with caution tape or police crime scene tape surrounding him. I spoke to Officer Roberts, who kind of briefed me on the information that she had gathered at that point.
Okay. So you spoke to Officer Roberts. Did Officer Roberts hand anything over to you?
She did.
What did she hand over
It was
to you?
a thumb drive that was containing video footage from I think Diego Perez.
Okay. And did you come to find out that there was a certain cell phone that was in another officer's car?
I did.
Okay. Whose cell phone was that?
That was Mr. William Bryan's cell phone, and it
Okay.
was in Sergeant Leska's car.
Okay. And what did you do after that?
I spoke briefly with Mr. Bryan, who was on scene.
Okay.
I was told by another officer that he had already given consent for us to view a video that he had taken on his phone. I spoke to him and just reconfirmed that verbal consent, and I viewed it on scene.
Okay.
And then I spoke with him a little longer. I got him to agree to come back to Glenn County headquarters for an interview so that we could speak to him a little bit more in depth and do a download of the phone. He agreed.
Where was Mr. Bryan on scene when you spoke with him?
He was standing on the corner of, I believe it was Holmes and Burford, next to a bicycle and a tree.
Okay. All right. And just going back for a moment, did you recognize any, other than the law enforcement officers who you obviously knew because you worked with them, did you recognize anyone else on scene that day?
Yes, I recognized Greg McMichael.
Okay. And do you see him in court today? And if you need to stand up, you can do that.
No. Is that him there?
Where are you pointing to?
To my right of the woman in the yellow shirt. I haven't seen him in a while. He looks a little different.
He looks a little different. Okay.
I apologize.
Okay. And what color is he wearing for the record?
Blue jacket and I think a blue tie.
Okay. Your Honor, let the record reflect that he has just identified Greg McMichael. So how did you recognize Greg McMichael?
I had seen him before coming to the police department I always assumed he was delivering subpoenas, but I'd seen him coming in the back door carrying papers sometimes, and I knew that he was an investigator for the Glenn DA's office. So.
Okay. And what was your relationship with him, if any?
There wasn't one. I mean, maybe, hey man, as I pass him, if I happen to be coming in as he's going out or something.
Okay. All right. Did you all ever kind of go over to each other's houses or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Do you recognize William Bryan, who you
Yes.
spoke of on scene? Okay. Can you just point him out, describe what he's wearing?
It's going to be Mr. Bryan there. He's got on a blue jacket and a gray shirt. I can't make out the tie color.
Okay. Let the record reflect that he has just identified
Yes.
William Bryan. So, Mr. Lowry, so you said you got the phone and you said you viewed the video.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you spoke with Mr. Bryan to ask him if he would come to headquarters for an interview. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. When you spoke with him, did you pressure him in any way to talk to you?
No.
Okay. Did you?
I'll object. We can put that in context. When and where is this taking place?
I can ask specifically. Sure. So the questions I'm asking you now, are you still located on the scene?
Yes.
Okay, there at the intersection of Holmes and Satilla.
Yes.
And Satilla Shores, right? Okay. So at the point where you're talking to Mr. Bryan, you testified that he was near a bicycle
Yes.
there? Okay. So at that point, did you pressure him in any way to come talk to you at headquarters?
No pressure. I just asked if he would mind.
If he would mind coming to talk to you?
Something to that effect, yeah.
And what did he say?
It wasn't a problem or okay. He seemed willing to go.
Okay. Did you promise him anything of benefit, anything like that?
No.
At that point, was he under arrest?
No.
Was he detained?
No.
Was he in any kind of custody?
No.
Okay. So, what happened next?
I went back to headquarters and I conducted an interview with Mr. Bryan.
Okay. And how did Mr. Bryan get back to headquarters?
He drove. He drove his own vehicle.
He drove his own vehicle. By chance, do you recall what vehicle he was driving?
It was a Chevy Silverado. I think it was like dark gray.
You said what now?
Chevy Silverado. I think it was dark gray.
Okay. And when he got back to headquarters, where did he go for that interview?
One of our interview rooms.
Okay. And are those rooms equipped with video
Yes.
to record and audio as well?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in the beginning of your video interview, did you go over any kind of forms with Mr. Bryan?
Yes. I think I went over a consent to search form. Even though he had already given verbal consent, I think I just filled out a written form.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Lowry, I'm showing you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 298. Take a look at it and tell me if you recognize it.
Yes. This is the form that I filled out.
Okay, and is it a true and accurate copy of that form?
Yes.
Appeared to be altered in any way?
No.
Your Honor, at this time, we would tender State's 298.
No objection.
No objection.
It's admitted.
Permission to publish, Judge?
Go ahead.
Okay, so, let's see if I can get this to work for me here. So, Mr. Lowry, I'm gonna ask you, can you see this on your form?
Yes, ma'am.
On your monitor?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So if you can just make sure you're projecting your voice and speaking into the microphone, can you just go ahead and read this? What does it say here at the top?
It's the Glenn County Police Department General Investigations Unit.
Okay, and I won't ask you to read all this fine print. That's the address and all that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so start from here and just read that for us.
Consent to search form, cellular phone. I just got a blank where I filled in Mr. Bryan's name, William C. Bryan. Having been advised that law enforcement officers wish to make a search of my cellular telephone under my control or custody, I hereby permit Investigator S. Lowry and any other officers designated by him or her to assist in the search of my phone. The location of the phone is listed as 157 Public Safety Boulevard. Make is an iPhone. It's a Model 8. And I didn't list the serial IMEI service, and there was no PIN. Underneath that, it says, I understand the purpose of this consent to search is for the express purpose of searching said cellular telephone for evidence relating to the crime of aggravated assault or homicide. I have not been promised a reward of any type. I have not been threatened in any manner. I freely and voluntarily give my consent to conduct said search of the above described telephone to the above officer with full understanding of my rights and actions. I understand that this consent is voluntary on my part and may be revoked at any time. Signed this 23rd day of February 2020, signed by Mr. Bryan.
Okay, and did you pressure him or force him in any way to sign that?
No, ma'am.
Okay, you didn't promise him anything?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, you may just, they're a little finicky today, so.
Yes, sir.
Get too close to you, may give you some feedback.
Mr. Lowry, you talked about the interview being audio and video recorded, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, before coming to court today to testify, were you able to review that recording of Mr. Bryan's interview in its entirety?
Yes.
Does it appear to be accurate?
Yes.
Okay. At this time, we would tender States 195.
No objection. No objection.
No objection.
It's admitted.
Thank you. Now, in conjunction with that audio recording and video recorded interview, did you also look at the transcript prepared of that interview?
I did.
Okay. And did you look at it in its entirety?
I did.
Did it seem to match up the interview itself?
It did.
Was the wording identical?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And may I approach, Judge?
Yes.
All right. So I'm showing you what's been marked. For the purposes of identification as State's Exhibit 195A, is that the same transcript that you reviewed that we just talked about?
Yes, it looks like it is.
Okay. At this time, Judge, we would tender 195A.
No objection.
Correct.
Just for the record, Your Honor.
It's admitted for the record.
Okay, Mr. Lowry, so let's go ahead and go through some of these statements that Mr. Bryan made to you, okay? So you have the transcript there, and I'm also going to put excerpts up on this screen right here. So you can follow in the transcript or you can follow up on the screen, okay? All right, so just starting with the basics, did Mr. Bryan tell you what he was doing on the day in question on the 23rd of February 2020 around 1 p.m. or so?
I can't read what's on the screen.
There's nothing on there right now. But you, are
Okay,
you not
'cause
able to?
I was looking for the page and line references.
Okay, not for this, but when I start putting it up, it should be up there. Okay. So did he tell you what he was doing around 1 p.m. on February 23rd, 2020?
Yes, I believe he was working on his porch or his garage or something like that.
Okay. And do you remember specifically what he said he was doing?
I can find it.
Okay, if looking at the transcript will help you, go ahead and look at that.
Yes, he did say on the front porch.
Okay, so he's working on his front porch, and did he say that something happened to kind of catch his attention?
Yes.
As he's working on his front porch?
Yes.
What did he say happened?
I looked up, can I quote it?
Okay, let's do this. Let me direct you to the line. Okay, so go to page 4.
Yes, ma'am.
Lines 11 through 12, and stop at that period there after road.
Okay. Mr. Bryan says, front porch of the house, I looked up, see a black guy running down the road.
Okay, and did he also say something about a truck nearby?
Yes.
Okay, and you don't have to quote, you can just speak from your memory of the transcript at this point.
Yes, he saw a truck paralleling or following
Okay,
the other person he identified.
as the black guy running?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, and after this, what did he do?
He said, y'all got him, like a question,
Okay, and did he say that to the black guy or to the truck?
to the truck.
Did he ever ask the black guy if he was okay?
Not that he told me.
Did he ever ask the black guy if he needed help?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So after he hollered, y'all got him, what did he do?
He went to go to his truck to assist and realized he didn't have his keys. So he went back into his house, retrieved the keys, and got in his truck and kind of joined in.
Okay. And 307 Burford, Mr. Bryan's address. What neighborhood is that located in?
It's in Satilla Shores.
Okay. So I'm going to put up here on the screen, right here. So at the point where Mr. Bryan gets in his truck, did he go out onto the road?
No. He Should I read again or just my own words?
Your own words is fine.
No, he sat there for a second and kind of assessed,
Okay.
waited on Mr. Arbery to come back towards him.
Okay. And what road is directly in front of Mr. Bryan's house?
Burford.
Okay. So if you can just read here, page 5, lines 18 through 25.
Okay. So I just kind of sat there for a minute and didn't really.
I'm going to object. I think we got a matter we need to take up outside the jury.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's do this then. Ladies and gentlemen, we're probably at a good breaking point then for lunch. We're going to break until, since we're going to be addressing some matters before the court, probably 1 o'clock. Let's plan on 1 o'clock for the continuation of the evidence. Again, hold on a second. During the break, do not discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anybody else. Don't go looking for any information about the case. And again, if somebody's talking about it in your presence of hearing, please let the court know, and we'll see if we need to address that. Thank you.
All rise for the jury. Please be seated.
All right, sir, I'm going to ask that you go ahead and step down.
Yes, sir.
If I could have you back here just before 1 o'clock for continuation of evidence in the case. I remind you that you are under oath, so do not discuss your testimony with anyone during the break.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Goff.
Your Honor, it seems like it's getting increasingly more difficult for Mr. Bryan to receive a fair trial. And I'm not saying that the state is trying to make it difficult, but as a practical matter, the state is cutting these statements, and I understand the desire to satisfy the McMichael defendants and their root concerns, but the state is cutting up these statements so they are fundamentally being changed. And then when I try and cross-examine, the answer is going to be, oh, well, we didn't have any choice. And I'm not saying that there isn't some truth to that. But we're cutting up these statements to the point where what's being presented is consciously or unconsciously misleading. We're also, instead of asking, as I thought we did the other day with the Mr. Minshew, we're not asking, directing your attention to page so-and-so, line so-and-so, do you recall what happened next? We're editorializing and we're changing the meaning of what's being said. For example, Roddy Bryan never said in the transcript that he hollered at anyone. More to the point, it's clear from the transcript itself that it was evident to Mr. Bryan that nobody could hear him. The characterization of what he's doing as hollering is unsupported by the record, it's unsupported by the transcript, and then I have to try and get into that. We're talking about seeing the black guy going by. It's not clear that he's being followed by the truck. Now, I understand the state wants to present that through other evidence. We've got the Night Owl video and so forth, but this is, for Mr. Bryan, this is a critical witness in the case. And this material is being cut up and presented in a way that's troubling. For example, Ms. Oliveira, and I'm not saying it's done intentionally, I understand the difficulty here. But for example, we've heard the words chase used, the police report used the words follow. Now all of a sudden, Mr. Bryan is saying that he joined in. Mr. Bryan never used those words. And I would point out, Your Honor, that the way all this is happening is that the state is leading former Detective Lowry through the statement. Now, if he's leading him to pages and lines, and he's simply directed to that point to present evidence to the court, that's one thing. But to be leading the witness into statements like hollered and joined in, that is not simply allowing the state to get the evidence in front of the jury. It is leading to twist the narrative in ways that I would respectfully submit, whether the state pondered it or not, are simply unfair and violative of my client's rights. And it's not that we're not trying to work through it, and maybe over lunch some of these issues will go away. And I'm not asking the court at this point to bring the jury back in and give a curative instruction. I'm not asking for any admonishments, but I would just urge the state, and maybe the court could provide some guidance, that if we're going to go beyond asking page and line references and what was actually said, then we're not going to be able to lead them there. I can lead all day long. I can do that, but they can't.
Let me join in this, because the statements that are being made, did he indicate that he joined in? Yes, he did. What did he say? I got in my car and pulled into the road. That's a problem. He's not saying he joined in. He just says, I got in my car, but because of the question. So we join in that motion. It is unfair characterization. I think the court should say, from this point forward, you just need to say, read line 1 or 2 through line 4 or 5, and leave it at that without characterizing it beyond what's actually said.
Greg McMichael joins this motion as well.
So taking on the defense aren't going to be editorializing either, and they're just pointing to one page.
What did he say is the question, not did he say.
Maybe I should have. It's just like, let me hear from the state. I do want to address, we're doing it a little differently with this witness, and I think that may be where most of this objection seems to be coming from, but from the state.
Your Honor, on page 4 of the transcript, in terms of Mr. Goff's complaint that I used the word hollered, his client actually used the word hollered. His client said, so I started running towards my truck and I hollered at that point. I said, y'all got him? So that was a word from Mr. Bryan himself. And I understand that I didn't have excerpts for Officer Minshew's testimony, but it's essentially the transcript that the witness is reading from. It just helps as a visual aid for the jurors as well. So I went ahead and got excerpts from the transcript, but nothing has changed in terms of me adding or deleting anything.
Okay. Here's what I heard. That, as counsel is aware, the struggle with doing the statements in this way is we're having witnesses testify to individual statements that aren't coming in because of these brutal issues and other discussions that the court was not privy to before we got into trial. So this is a different, it's not the normal way, it's not, and it's permissible to do it this way. It just creates a lot of issues like this. What I think I heard, and I agree with, is what happened just a moment ago is the witness effectively summarized what he thought the statement was and then was asked again what the statement was, and the statement got presented on the screen. That's how I heard it. The objection to that is similar to objections I was getting about getting into the minds of the individual who's making the statement, and from my perspective, sort of mixing up true statements by individuals and what other people thought they may be saying. And that's been going round and round, I think, with a number of different witnesses here. And I'm trying to figure out how to bring this together in a nice bow to be clear. But where I'm going with it is, if we've got a witness up on the stand and he's putting up the defendant's statement, we need to ensure for the jury and for the clarity of the transcript what the defendant's statement is, as opposed to somebody else's interpretation. Y'all can argue whatever you want about those statements at some point later in the trial. And that's starting to be what's going on here. You'll have that opportunity. I'll give you that full opportunity at some point. But that's not what we're doing here. And so what I'd like to do is, instead of getting somebody to interpret the statement, if it exists in the transcript, present the statement. And if there is a rule of completeness issue, let's go ahead and put the complete statement out there if you believe that there is more to the statement than has been presented.
Yes, Your Honor. And if I may just add one thing, I know in the course of preparing for this trial and preparing for these statements to come in, we've spoken with the defense attorneys regarding, some statements will be specific quotes, while others will be generally
what did he say or what did he do? And they seem to agree with that.
Okay,
Am I not correct? Didn't we have that conversation?
So here's what I've discovered about all these agreements that were made before trial is the moment the evidence started coming, all these agreements, everyone says, oh, Your Honor, we're not holding everybody to the agreements we had before trial. I will point out, none of these agreements were presented to the court in writing. There's nothing that I have to enforce them or not enforce them. I had encouraged counsel to go ahead and agree to whatever could be agreed to. Apparently, some of those agreements weren't as clear as counsel believed they were. There is very little the court can do about that. What I'm telling you, though, for clarity, given this way that we're presenting the evidence, I think it's only fair that the jury understand what the statements of the defendants actually were, if they're coming in this way. If there's some clarity that needs through completeness, the court's going to permit that, as I indicated in my previous rulings. But as far as editorializing on them, and that y'all are welcome to do that. You will have the facts and evidence. And again, in closing, if there are reasonable deductions that can be reached from that evidence, go ahead and argue them. We don't need to be arguing it all now.
I don't contest the state's need at some point to get into context. That's going to be an issue. And it may be, as the evidence develops, it becomes appropriate, even during the examination of this witness. Part of the problem is, I think there was an agreement by one or more of the McMichael defendants with respect to Bruton issues in Mr. Bryan's statements. And I don't have a problem with Bruton issues being addressed, but what's happening as you go through the red versus the blue versus the yellow is the McMichael defendants' agreements with respect to the Bruton issues that my client doesn't have standing for do impact the rule of completeness, where we're parsing up the statements like, I killed him, and leave out in self-defense. That's where we're coming from. Over the break, I'll certainly do what I can to try and minimize those issues going forward. But I do think that I understand where the state's coming from with agreements on Bruton with co-counsel. But they can't resolve those issues without creating rule of completeness problems for Mr. Bryan. And I shouldn't have to spend hours going back through line by line, word by word, doing that. But we'll see.
Well, Judge, just, so the court's clear, whenever Mr. Lowry gets back on the stand,
If you could step closer to a microphone, please.
I have about 12 excerpts
Taken directly from the transcript that I intend to place right there, and they're right from the transcript, so it'll be quotations.
Again, courts instruct the counsel how I'd like for this to proceed. If we can do it that way, then it's pretty clear to the court how we can move along. If we start deviating, then we'll see the reasons for deviating and whether we'll allow that to come in. All right. It is just about 12 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and recess until 1 o'clock for lunch. Anything from the state before we recess?
No, Your Honor.
From Travis McMichael.
No, Your Honor.
From Greg McMichael.
No, Your Honor.
From Mr. Bryan.
No, Your Honor.
All right. We will see you at 1 o'clock. Thank you. We're in recess.
Tell them, Wanda.
In the very beginning, after we laid Ahmaud to rest, it was very hard because we couldn't find any help. The local authorities, they wouldn't give us any answers.
Come on.
And we went for weeks trying to find out what happened to Ahmaud.
Yes.
But in the midst of it all, I prayed.
Yes. Yeah.
And God answered my prayer.
Yes.
This day, as we stand before this courthouse, I thought this day would never come. That we're standing here along with Mr. Al Sharpton.
Amen.
Along with two powerful attorneys who's standing with us to get justice for Ahmaud.
Yes. Amen.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. I'm going to leave you with this. God is good. Yes, he is. Trust God. Trust him.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes. Amen. 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 Oh, God, it's hard for me. But I got to give all glory, number one, to God. Amen. I got to give all glory to his mama, because without his mama, I wouldn't have had Ahmaud. Amen. So I always got to love her. Amen. Always, no matter what the situation is, I'm always care for her. Amen. Because without her, it wouldn't be Ahmaud, it won't be a jab, it won't be a buck, I won't have grandbabies. Right. Amen. So I'm thanking God for her. Yeah. And I feel her pain, because I'm a daddy, and it hurt me. But she said a lot by prayers. We know our boy was lynched, and we kept searching for answers. But guess what? It's God. We didn't give up. I got to thank God for y'all people, my brothers and sisters. They kept going them officers fighting. Miss Bob Ann Wano. These Turners here, all both of them. Lee Merritt, Ben Crump, we got to thank God, because they put us together. They come to fight with us to get equal justice for us, so we can fight and get some justice for Ahmaud, because he was lynched. He was terrified. He was a baby out of all of them. He didn't have to do the thing they say he did. He didn't have that. He had his mama getting him everything. He called me on phone again. Dad, I need this. He got it. Right. He didn't have to do it. He was staying in a $100,000 house. What he had to take for? When he had a mama getting him everything, a brother getting him everything, a sister getting him everything, a daddy called me. And I'm going to tell y'all another secret. You know why I know my boy ain't steal nothing? Because every time he ran, he broke his phone. And mama said, I ain't buying you no more phone. Because you break your phone. He couldn't tote nothing. So guess what I said? Your mama said you wasn't getting no phone. I'm going to get you a phone. I bought him another phone. And guess what? I say leave your phone home. Right. Because you always running. That's why I know my boy ain't take nothing. My boy got killed because of skin color. Lynch. All right. Briefly, you're going to hear, if I can have your attention. Hold on 1 second. Lee, hold on for a second. Hold on. 1 minute. 1 minute. Okay. Now we're going to hear from Amy Sutherland and James Sutherland. If you haven't saw the video of their son being tased to death in Charleston, South Carolina, you understand how important it is for them to be here with the family of Ahmaud Arbery, because they're all in this fraternity nobody wants to be in. Miss Amy Sutherland and Deacon James Sutherland.
Good evening. We came here to support a family that is going through the same thing that we are going through. We're from Charleston, South Carolina. Ahmaud is blessed because in our situation, there is no charge. The murder's caught on tape. Nobody has gone to jail. I want to ask everybody, because like his family, we're family that belongs to God. Yes. Jamal is with God. I want the world to know that my son did nothing to deserve the lynching, as they call it, the lynching that he received. And I pray to God that the outcome for this family is something that we will one day receive. Yes.
Amen.
Amen.
Deacon Sutherland.
We thank you all for coming and supporting the Arbery family.
Yes.
Although Ahmaud is not here anymore, his parents are still in the fight.
Yes.
They will not rest, and they will not forget. just as my wife just said, we haven't received any justice. The system thinks that they can just throw a few dollars at you and that you'll shut up and go away.
That's, yes.
But we're not going anywhere.
That's right.
My son, Jamal Sutherland, he was a Christian. He was a kind-hearted individual. Yes, sir. That had mental health issues. Mental health issues is not a sentence for death. Many of you have family members that have mental health issues. And just like Dr. Ben Crump said, he asked for help. And they gave him pepper spray and tasers. And they killed him.
My Lord.
And did not render any first aid.
My Lord.
Watched him die on the floor like an animal. And the solicitor said her hands are tied. She can't do anything. I would have wished that she would have charged them and lost the case instead of sit on her hands and not do nothing.
My Lord. Tell him, Deacon. Let me say this, Marcus. Let me say this before we take questions and answers. Two things that you're looking at is no matter what happens in our families, you're seeing two black men stand up for their sons. And you're seeing two mothers that despite their pain still believes in God. You're seeing two of our highest profile lawyers working together. Let me also say, when Attorney General Ben Crump said that we are approaching 10 years after Trayvon, don't forget, they never intended to arrest and indict Zimmerman.
That's right.
Come on. It was a movement that made them arrest and indict and prosecute Zimmerman. And let's not be fooled. They never intended for these three to be in a court. Come on. Come on. The reason they are even on trial is because some of us stood with this father and mother and demanded justice. Come on. They never intended to arrest them. Now that they've arrested them, let's deal with the evidence. How do you have a self-defense evidence when there is no evidence that you had something to defend yourself against? Come on, break it down, man. Come on, man. In order to have a defense, you must have an offense. And what was Ahmaud's offense? There was no robbery. There was no weapon. Come on. So what are you defending yourself against? Come on. Even though we feel the racial makeup of this jury is insulting, we call on them to do the right thing. Come on. Don't break the law by giving somebody self-defense when there was nothing to defend against. All right. Come on. Yeah. Come on. Come on.
Thank you, Reverend Al. He's not a lawyer, but he's a great co-counsel. With that, we'll take your questions. If you have.
Why did you think it was important to come out to Brunswick today to support the Arbery family?
Because I think that, first of all, I came because when Marcus and Wanda came to Savannah, and they've both been on my show, we've talked down through the months, but they said we think it would be good if you came, so people would see that you came. And I said that I would do that. And I'm supposed to be somewhere else, and I'm going tonight there, but because the trial started faster than I thought. But I wanted to be here if my presence meant something to them. And if it's sending a signal to others, I wanted to do that.
Reverend Sharpton, you have the National Action Network. You have your own TV show as well. Talk about the network of people coming together and how you hope that impacts the legal side of this.
I think that when you see National Action Network, when you see Barbara Unwind and Transformers, when you see national organizations come in with local people.
Yes.
The Civil Rights Movement was about local people with national reinforcement. It will lead to change, and it will say to the officials here, in Wynn County.
That's
That
right.
this is not going to end here.
That's right.
That
Right.
Ahmaud
Amen.
Arbery's
That's why
name
they don't
is
want
going
on
to
here.
ring.
Right.
You could either be known for a city that took a jury that was not represented and still did the right thing, and you can be saluted for that, or you can be known as continuing what ugly history has happened in Georgia for centuries. It's up to you.
Thank you.
Mr. Arbery, what is it like to have the Reverend here supporting you and your family?
Awesome. Step to the mic. Oh, it's awesome. Got a team that fight.
Yes.
And it ain't like they just started yesterday. They got many years on their belt fighting. Equal justice. Al Sharpton, awesome. What I like about him, he's not phony.
That's right.
He real. He bring that real stuff to you. That's what I like about him. I told him that day one.
That's right.
All these turning back him, being crunk, real.
That's right.
They don't hide it. What you gonna hide it for? They bring it to you real, let you know what's going on for real. You know, it's been hide too long. But when you get this team here, they finna bring it to you.
Oh yeah.
They gonna bring that real to you.
Oh yeah.
Thank you, Marcus. Few more questions?
Talking about the jury selection process and the jury that we had, 11 white, 1 black. But during the jury selection process, several of the white prospective jurors that were questioned said they thought McMichaels, what they did was wrong. They believe that they should go to prison. Does they get any sense of encouragement with that, knowing that there were white people in this community that did indicate they believe what happened was wrong and that someone should pay?
Let me say this. I think the fact that some whites in Brunswick have said that this was racial and have said it was wrong is encouraging.
Yes, it is.
I think that we ought to give credit to some whites that have stood with the local actors
That's right.
and said this is wrong.
Yes, sir.
This is about race, but it's not limited to race.
Yes.
There are whites that see this as disgraceful
Right.
and don't want their town known for this.
All right.
But when you have even the judge saying that there seemed to be some bias involved, but the Georgia law barred him. We need to look at the law, and we need white and black to stand together against this kind of nonsense.
Amen. I would simply say this. We argue cases all across America, and the majority of those cases are argued before majority white juries.
Yes.
And oftentimes we're representing people of color.